Well, welcome to MissouriNet.com. I'm Bill Pollock, and always excited when I host a Google Hangout, but when I'm able to bring somebody new along and someone that I just started following and chatting with on Twitter is Seth Merenbloom, who is the managing editor and college football writer for CFBRoundtable.com, and a big Mizzou fan, follows Mizzou. And so, Seth, I wanted to bring you along because we're kind of getting into crunch time here. You know what's on the line, 2 more wins, and Mizzou goes back to Atlanta. I guess my first question, being that you followed Mizzou, if you would have known 3 years ago that Missouri would be in this position to go back to Atlanta for 2 years in a row, would you have thought that I was crazy if I brought that up?
2 years in a row, I probably would have thought you were crazy. My expectation at the time was, I thought it would take 3 to 5 years for Pinkel to get the program competitive in the SEC. But then at that point, I thought they would begin to have similar success that they had had in the Big 12.
And what's amazing is after that first year, there were some fans that wanted Pinkel gone, said we need to make a coaching change.
Yeah, and to be honest, I was probably in that circle of people.
You were.
To be perfectly honest, yeah. In retrospect, that would have been a horrible, horrible decision. But that's why I'm on this side of the conversation and not standing on the sideline with a visor.
Hey, you know what? It takes a man though to admit that. I give you a thumbs up for that. No doubt. All right, Seth. Here we go. Now I've been listening to local radio. I've been listening to more of the national people kind of talk. It just never seems like Missouri gets respect. And I'm listening to people say, "Whoa, we got a tough game at Tennessee. We got to worry about Arkansas because they beat LSU." Nobody ever talks about the fact that Missouri's defense is really good, and I would put their defense at this point in the season right now up against any other team in the SEC. Why is nobody noticing Missouri's defense?
I think it's a bit of old school SEC bias. I think there are instances where that proverbial SEC bias helps Missouri. I still think there are numerous, if not more, instances where that bias is used against Missouri. Defensively, people don't expect nationally or maybe even regionally for Missouri and a Gary Pinkel team to have a stout defense because everybody knows Missouri's product as Chase Daniel, Brad Smith, Jeremy Macklin, putting 40 to 50 points up a game. This idea that Missouri has a defense now, I think, catches people off guard, and there might be a little bit of that show me mentality behind it. Basically, yeah, it's great this year, but it's not going to be for real unless it's 2 years in a row, 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row, type of thing.
Well, you're right about that. You talk about the SEC bias. Now, listen, I know that, and Gary Pinkel even admitted that Georgia game was a mess. That thing just turned out bad. But Missouri still leads Georgia in the SEC East, and they're behind them. And I thought I heard that Mizzou is not favored in this game at Tennessee. I just, at some point, they got to start getting some respect, though. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, especially as a road team, I think they need to start getting some respect because I believe after the A&M game finished up, Pinkel and the Tigers have won 9 straight road games or 9 straight SEC road games, I believe. Yep. So they get it done on the road, and this year, tying it back to the previous comment you had, I think it's directly tied to that defense. If you can play defense and you can stop the run, you're giving yourself a fighting chance on the road. And as far as Missouri being an underdog going into this week at Tennessee, Tennessee's the hot SEC team, I think, at least in people's minds. They have Dobbs, who's starting to come into his own a little bit. I think people desperately want Tennessee to be really, really good again. They see the recruiting classes that have been brought in there, so they just think it's a no-brainer that Tennessee's the hot team. They should lay it alone. So personally, I don't think that's the way it's going to go down, but I think that's the mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you because here's the thing. I was looking at that roster. They've got a lot of young players, and they're good, but they knocked off Georgia earlier in the year. They lost by 14 to Alabama. They beat South Carolina in double overtime. So, I mean, they're one of those teams where you can look at them and they're promising. And everyone that I've talked to at the beginning of the year that had ties to Tennessee and the Volunteers all told me, in a couple of years, this team is going to be really good. These recruits, if they come through the way that everyone's talking about, they're going to be really good. But yeah, I don't think they're there yet. Seth Merenbloom is the managing editor and college football writer for CFBRoundtable.com, and we'll get to your story that you just posted today on your website, talking about Florida and their head coaching search in a minute. But I just want to ask one more question.
Sure.
Were you encouraged by what you saw from Mizzou's offense, and do you think maybe they're starting to turn a corner?
Yes, absolutely. That was the big issue with the Georgia game. It wasn't about the defense. Everybody looks at it, give up 34 points. But Steckel's defense was on the field a ton because the Tigers' offense and Mock, they couldn't move the ball. And I think, per pass attempt, Mock had 1.1 yards per attempt. That's just not going to get it done, and it's not fair to the defense. But since that time, I'm a huge Josh Henson fan. He's completely reinvented that offense. I think he's putting Mock in positions to be successful using, I think, tighter formations that help protect him a little bit. And that Texas A&M game was just the culmination of all of that. And I think that's how good this offense can be within the limitations that that Mock offers to the game. Henson's just done a magical job, I think.
Well, the one thing they've recognized is they've got to run the ball. But what I liked is when they hired Henson and they got away from Coach Yost, is he said we're going to be more vertical down the field, and that worked last year when you had guys like DGB and LaDainian Washington and Marcus Lucas. Well, now those receivers aren't the same, and so you know what? Nobody was complaining about Matty Mock when he had those receivers to throw to, filling in for Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And how funny how they wanted him in the game last year as the backup. Now they're calling for his backup to come in. It's like, whoa, slow down a little bit. I thought Henson has done a good job in adjusting and realizing, hey, we've got to run first, and then that'll open up our passing game, because our passing game at this point is not the strong suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I completely agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk now. Let me bring up your website, and give me a moment here.
All right.
And make sure everyone can see this. CFBRoundtable.com. You've got the College Quickie Dynasty mode, and you're talking about who fills in now, who replaces Will Muschamp at Florida. Talk a little bit about your story, and then talk about the names that you have at the bottom of this page. We'll scroll down. Are those your thoughts, or are those what you're hearing? Because there are some interesting names you have on this list.
These names are strictly my thoughts. I don't attach these thoughts to anybody else other than myself. I think the Mike Gundy name is, as I state in the article, is popping up nationally, and for whatever it's worth, Las Vegas, I believe, has him as the odds-on favorite to be offered and to accept the job. How they come to that, I don't really know.
And I don't even know when Vegas got into it.
I know.
You can put money on anything now, can't you?
Yes, you can. Absolutely. You could probably put money on what my next article is going to be. But these are strictly my thoughts. Jeremy Foley, the Florida AD, I believe came out a few days ago and said that he wants somebody as the Florida head coach that is offensive-minded. I think that's kind of a double-edged sword, but based on those comments, that's how I started to come up with, in my own mind, names like Art Briles and Mike Gundy. I think other guys like Rich Rodriguez and Jim Harbaugh, I don't know, those seem like long shots, extreme long shots.
Yeah, I would think, if anything, if Harbaugh leaves the 49ers, it would be for Michigan.
Yeah, and I kind of doubt if that happens, because going home isn't always the best situation for somebody. I don't think. Sometimes that gives you even more to lose.
And then your other name that you have here on the list, and Rams fans and maybe Sam Bradford would be thinking, oh, no, Brian Schottenheimer.
There's always, it seems, that dark horse candidate in these job searches, that a name that kind of comes out of nowhere but has some kind of tie to the program. So, again, this is just my shot in the dark. Has the NFL ties, has been a very successful NFL assistant and offensive coordinator, was an assistant, not an assistant, was a backup quarterback for the 1996 Steve Spurrier National Championship team at Florida. So he has that connection. He knows what it takes to win. He's certainly worked some magic at the NFL level with the Rams this year in what he's done with Davis at quarterback. I don't think anybody would have expected the Rams to have much, if any, success this year, especially after Bradford went down. So I think if there was any time where his stock as a Florida alum was high, it's going to be now. Whether or not he has any interest in a college gig, I have no clue. But that was my mindset with putting him on my personal list.
Yeah, an interesting name to throw out there, interesting list. You can check it out at cfbroundtable.com, and then I'll also link that story at MissouriNet.com if that's where you're watching this video. Yeah. So, Seth Merenbloom, what's your thoughts, score prediction, or how you see it playing out against Tennessee?
I could see a similar type game that we just saw with A&M. I would expect each team to be able to put some points on the board. Going into the game for Missouri, I would expect Henson and Pinkel to run the ball again. I think defensively, that's where Tennessee's weakness is. They give up a lot of yards on the ground, at least per rush. They don't run the ball particularly well. So I think strength against strength against weakness, I think it sets up really well for Missouri, particularly with the offensive lineman, the starting center for Tennessee, who looks doubtful going into this game. If I'm a backup center, I would not want to be facing Missouri's defensive line right
now. No, definitely not. All right, good. Let's do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And, where can people follow you on Twitter?
People can follow me at S Merenbloom, and I can be found on CFB Roundtable as well, both on the webpage as well as at CFB Roundtable on Twitter.
That's perfect, and I'll try to remember to link all that stuff to this story as well at MissouriNet.com. Seth Merenbloom, the managing editor and college football writer for CFBRoundtable.com. And following the Tigers, you can follow both of us on Twitter during the game and chat with us. We have some good conversations during the game.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, thanks a lot, Seth. And
thank you, Bill.
Soon, here at MissouriNet.com.